beginning of the Babylonian exile, the evil king Nebuchadnezzar demanded that the Jews publicly worship an idol. And he demanded of three greats, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, to bow down to an idol publicly. And at the threat of, if they don't do it, they'll be thrown into a burning furnace. And they were ready to give up their lives. They did not bow down. They were thrown into the burning furnace. Miraculously, they were saved. The Talmud says that they learned their behavior, their willingness to be thrown into a burning furnace to honor God. They learned it from the frogs. That's the frogs from the plague of frogs in this week's portion. That the frogs accepted the decree and they jumped into the ovens, because God says the frogs are going to be all over Egypt and they're even going to go into the ovens. So the frogs went into the ovens. So if the frogs went into the ovens to honor God, certainly we're ready to give up our lives. Rabbi Shimon Schwab and many asked the question, the frogs didn't have a choice. The frogs, that was the decree of God. So how can Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah learn from the frogs? The frogs had no choice. They had choice. And Rabbi Shimon Schwab explains beautifully that the analogy to the frogs is a perfect analogy. Because the prophet Ezekiel came to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and he said, run away. You could run away. You could save yourselves. This way, you're not going to be confronted. You're not going to be put into a situation to bow down to the idol. And you won't have to die. And they said, no, we are ready to publicly sanctify the name of God, because otherwise no one will stand up and no one will honor the name of God. The Talmud says they learned this from the frogs. They had a choice. They could have run away. The frogs, too, had a choice. If you look in the Torah, you see that the decree was that there were frogs that would come into the house, frogs that would come into the beds, frogs that would go into the cooking vessels, and frogs that would go into the oven, and frogs that would go all over Egypt. Now, each frog had a choice. And there were many frogs that said, I should be the one to join it, to jump into the furnace. Ugh, I'll go into the house. I'll go into the yard. But there were some frogs who made the choice. And they said, I am going to honor the decree of God, because God decreed that there were frogs that were going to go jump into the oven. I'm going to do that, because I'm going to be the best frog that I could be. Many times we have openings to do a mitzvah. We have choices to make. We could be the one to do the mitzvah, or somebody else can handle it. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah learned from the frogs. Be ready, just like the frogs that jumped into the oven. They said, I'm going to be the best frog that I can be. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah said, I'm going to be the best servant of God that I can be. And if there's an opportunity for me to sanctify the name of God, to do that mitzvah, I'm ready to do it. So the message, of course, is to always look for ways to serve God. And if there are options to get out of it, we should be ready to choose the option to get into it. By the way, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah survived miraculously. And by the way, the Medrash teaches that after the plague of frogs, when Pharaoh entreated Moses to pray to God to remove the frogs, all of the frogs in Egypt died except for the ones that courageously jumped into the oven. Have a fabulous Shabbos.